Hey guys, this is Pato Award, and you're listening to Indie Sports Podcast. And or what is that? Is that what it's called? Yeah,
That's
right.
that's perfect.
Or did I say something wrong?
No, trust me, man. I mean, I can edit all this. It's no
What
problem.
is
You
it?
can
What is it again? Indie Sports Podcast or what?
The Indie Sports Car Podcast.
Indie Sports Cars Podcast.
Nice. Yeah, if you want to try it again, go ahead.
Hi guys, I'm Pato Award, and you're listening to the Indie Sports Car Podcast.
Welcome, ICP fans, to a special show. I think yes, special show, F1 show. We love doing this. What's up, Missy?
Hello. Special F1 show.
Well, that's because we're still going to do the regular show later on in the week with Christian, but this week, or I mean today or tonight, which was supposed to be last night, but I fell asleep. My fault. So, but introduce who I'm apologizing to.
So joining the show tonight, we have welcoming back, I should say. Yes, welcoming back. We have Richard Youden. If everyone remembers, he's a contributor to Drafting the Circuits. So welcome back, Richard.
Thanks for having me back.
Richard, thanks for coming back on, man.
I've only been waiting 24 hours. I've been sat by the laptop for 24 hours waiting for you, but we're here.
It sounds like a lie. But I extend my apologies nonetheless because I woke up at like 8 and I'm like, oh no. I think I missed. I think we were oops. And I was like, I blamed it all on you, Missy, and I never even really asked you to do anything. But you were.
I know.
Anyway.
This was news to me. I was like, oh, we were? Well, you could have told me. I could have woke you up at that point since you fell asleep, but...
Rich, what did my text say?
Right, it was sort of some garbled half asleep slur, I think. But it's in there somewhere.
I was like, if I was asleep, just pushing a button somewhere.
Yeah,
but trust me, Missy was in there. Missy was supposed to wake me up. Yeah, I think.
It's been a long weekend. I wasn't much better, but we're here now. So that's the main thing.
That is the main thing. And F1 has officially started to the Australian GP, the Grand Prix of Australia. That's right, down under, home of the upside down Whopper. Apparently. I didn't know that. Did you know that? You got
the toilets spin the other way when you flush them as well, apparently.
Is that... Well, I mean, you've been there with Williams. Is it true?
I've never made it to Australia. I never did any of the flyaway races. They couldn't afford me up there.
Oh, okay.
So I'd never ventured to Australia or any of those places. Unfortunately, it would have been great to have gone out there, but no. I mainly trod the boards of the European circuits.
Okay, so like
so yeah, never got to. Yeah,
I don't think you missed anything. Too many things down there that could take you out, you know?
Yeah.
Dangerous place, that Australia.
Things that bite you and eat you. Yeah, no.
Speaking of that, I was talking to Anthony Martin the other day, and he's like, you and Missy should move down here, to Perth or whatever. And I'm like, are you out of your mind? Everything there seems like it just is there to kill you.
Pretty much, yeah.
And he goes, no, it only happens like twice a week. And I'm like, that's 104 times you're dodging, death on a yearly basis in Australia.
Hey, I don't like a lot of those things that can, kill you. Snakes, probably big spiders, and
emus.
A lot of big, emus. Oh, come on. Although they did lose that war, but anyway. That's sad. And it's sad that it's called a war. But I'm not getting into that. We are so not getting into the emu war. No.
That's where I got the upside down Whopper from. How else would I know that?
Anyway, Formula One.
There was a race, wasn't there?
There was. They started this weekend.
There was a race where they lost a war to emus and have an upside down Whopper. Yep. The Grand Prix of
That would
Australia.
probably be the most exciting thing that happened during the race, I think.
I mean, maybe other things might have happened. We wouldn't know. We wouldn't have seen them on the great
I did
coverage.
hear about that. I must admit, I streamed it from a UK streaming service that I still have access to. So I got the uninterrupted version, and then I saw on the internet and on Facebook everybody complaining about the coverage. And the problem they've got now, of course, is they're taking the world feed from Sky TV, which are the British broadcasters of Formula One, and who have done a fantastic job for probably the good end of 10 years now.
Right.
And covering it far, far better than anything else I've ever seen. But they show totally uninterrupted coverage of the race. Whereas, obviously, in the US, when it's covered over here, they have to put their advertising breaks in, which is, that's a part of it. But it's not managed. So, from my understanding and talking to people that watched it on the US feed, you just suddenly go to a commercial in the middle of somebody's sentence, and it would jump back in, and it was very poorly managed. And edited, and that's the hard thing for
At least
the world feed to run that.
I mean, at least NBC, like Lee Diffie and Matchett and the other guy,
David
Hobbs,
yeah.
At least they would say, this isn't our feed, we're just coming back to it. Hopefully they show it, this and that.
Yeah.
And at least we had live commentary from three guys. Also, might as well be sitting on a couch watching it just like us, but they have a camera and a microphone. So
yeah.
But at least we got that. But with the ESPN feed, they were just like, why spend money on commentators? We don't spend money on news anchors or anything because we keep firing them all. So let's just use the national guys, and we'll just cut off mid sentence and join mid sentence.
Yeah. I mean, if it's done properly, I think it's better than the. If it's done properly and utilised properly, I think it's better than the service that there's been here for the last few years when I've watched it over here. But obviously, it's difficult to sort of stream a service as a thing. I understand the need for commercials and the need to break it up.
Sure,
but you, excuse me, hang on. Oh boy.
I get the need for commercials too, but I mean, I felt there was a lot more commercials during this race, and then, like you said, they cut the guy off mid-sentence, and then when we come back to action, you're just like, what the heck just happened? There's a Haas on the side of the road. What happened? Don't know. Wasn't explained.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just like, okay.
Now let's teach.
What happened here?
Now, Richard, let's teach the American public how what's the proper term for the large lug nut in the center, the center nut for the tire? What's the proper term for that?
Just a nut. Wheel nut, basically. Wheel nut is what we used to call them. Retaining nut, wheel nut.
Retaining nut. I like that. Okay, so the retaining nut, the center retaining nut. We'll just keep adding words to it that sound.
Yep.
Okay, so the what's it made out of? Titanium, aluminum.
So let me remember. There's two. They typically have two. So for now, this was going back a few years ago when I worked there, and I'm trying to get it the right way around. They had two different materials. They had one that they used during the race, which was very, very light, but could only be taken on and off a couple of times. And then for the Friday and Saturday practice, they had a different nut, which was a little bit heavier but harder wearing, and that could be taken on and off multiple times. I can't remember which. There was titanium, there was aluminum ones in there. I can't remember which way around they had it all now.
See, Richard, this is interesting because I don't know any of this. This is really interesting stuff, actually.
This is what we used to do at Williams. Whether that's changed now, I don't know.
I'm sure it's gotten even more crazier.
Was saying in an interview that the issue they had was lack of practice, potentially. I'm guessing it's the same.
The same guys from last year, lack of practice.
I mean,
I don't want to say it's that difficult, but they got one job. They got the gun. They push it in and pull it. I mean,
no.
How is that lack of practice? I'm
there's
sorry.
one guy that takes it off, and there's a guy that puts the
Yeah,
tire
yeah,
on,
I get
and there's
about
a
all
guy
that.
with another gun that puts
They
the
got a
nut
guy
on.
for everything, but
But
one
unlike
guy, gun, push the
unlike
button, pull it off.
unlike NASCAR, these guys are also mechanics and engineers and have multiple roles on the weekend. So
Right.
it's not like their sole responsibility is the pit stops. The
Right.
same in NASCAR and Cup races and all the other series. They have special high performance athletes who are pit guys.
Did you go for a reason?
Oh, sorry, that's just
Okay.
purely coincidental. No, they are very, very good. I'll give
No,
them
yeah,
credit.
I
They
mean,
are
like they got to be in shape to wear those fire suits and those helmets and everything. Because
in
wherever
those
they
sort of
race,
weather,
it's hot, man. I
unless
mean,
it's
they're in,
Martinsville in March.
well, that's true. Or like the Indy GP in the beginning of May for some reason. It's frigid cold. I don't know why.
Yes.
The
But
whole
those so and Gunter Steiner did openly say, he said, look, we had issues on Friday and Saturday with the car, which meant we couldn't do as much practice as we'd like to have done. And that's I mean that may be the case, but
But they were the only
you know
team.
they are very easy to get these things cross-threaded.
Right. And now this is what I wanted, like this was the important question, is exactly how do they put the nut on the gun, because they pre-nut the gun, obviously, and that's funny sounding, but they pre-nut the gun, and then they, is there a mark that the hub on the main chassis comes in, that they take the tire out on
No,
the caliber or
because
something?
no, because it's just a central hub. Unlike the Cup car, where you've got your 5 lug nuts, and you do have to like align the wheel with the with the threads. In Form One, it literally just slides on and off, and because the nut is retained, you just have to hit it and engage it with the gun. There's no sort of alignment, really. I mean, and goodness me, that's not trying to diminish what those guys do.
So
But
does
it's
it
all
so it
about
almost like
timing.
threads itself when
Yeah,
you throw
to a
it on?
greater extent. Now,
It's like a pre-threading kind of nut.
yeah, yeah.
Ah.
It's
So it's like a self-tapping nut.
to a greater extent, yeah.
I like that. Okay.
For them to cross thread, wow. I mean, that is pretty unusual to see one cross thread. To see two, hey,
That's-
Back to back, it was crushing.
I
I mean, they
mean,
were doing so well too. I felt really bad. I did feel really bad for
Yeah.
Haas. I mean, they were running like 5th and 6th, I think,
they
when that
were,
happened.
yeah. And and partly maybe it's the pressure of the situation, but in the grand scheme of things, when you look at it, they don't need to go. The position they were in, they didn't need to go that fast. It's not like they were, half a second ahead of another car and they really need to push it. They had quite a comfortable cushion to the guys behind, and they could have taken their time. And everybody's on about doing these super fast pit stops now. Well, sometimes I think they need to just, whoa, hang on, let's just make sure we do it right. And sometimes they get in a rhythm, and doing it fast is the way to do it. But I think they would. Oh, we've got to do it in under 3 seconds. Well, no, you could do it in 4, and you'd have still held the position.
Yeah, really. I mean, because I've seen like 2.5, and I was blown away when I seen 2.5.
Yeah,
when I seen 2.5, I went, "Whoa, that's insane!" You
What
can't.
did Williams get it down to? Is it like 1.9 or something? Williams got it down to. But mind you,
They still
when
have
I
the
was at
record, right?
Williams, they developed a pit stop testing facility, which was just out of this world.
Really? Like, what was it
Oh,
like?
it was a complete room, and they had like a hub assembly with all the suspension on, and it was all controlled by like a machine. You press a button, this thing would slide along as if the car was coming in, and the mechanics could then practice, gun on, gun off, and all this sort of stuff. 1.89 seconds is the fastest pit stop in Formula One.
Wow.
That was in 2016, but they got it so tight and so fast that and also this machine, you could say, right, the driver's going to overshoot by an inch, or he's going to be 6 inches over, or he's going to be 2 inches closer to you than you'd expect, or he's going to be at an angle, and they could do all of these things with this machine. So they spent and invested a huge amount of time into that facility. Now, this sort of leads a little bit onto another one of the stories that came out this weekend was people were sort of criticizing the Haas team for their basically being a Ferrari B team, and how they were picking up all the spare parts from Ferrari and all the old parts and running that. which it was quite ironic that some of the people complaining about it were Red Bull, but then they've got Toro Rosso. So,
Yeah, exactly. Like, well, Toro Rosso is a Ferrari customer team.
Yeah.
So, and
And
isn't Force
no,
India?
they run so Toro Rosso run a Honda engine, but a lot
Oh,
of their bodywork
I'm
in the
sorry.
past has come
That's right.
from Red
Yeah.
Bull as a parent company. And going back
Well,
4 or 5 years
Red
ago,
Bull's Renault, or I'm sorry, Tag
Tag Heuer,
Heuer, whatever. The
yeah,
the
it's Red
watch.
engine, yeah.
Yeah, right.
But I mean, Red Bull. The only thing that Red Bull get from Renault is the engine, whereas I believe Haas get the gearbox, transmission, suspension. Typically, if you buy a gearbox from somebody, you need the rear suspension to go with it because they're so
Yeah, I mean,
tightly
there's
linked.
pretty much Ferrari guys there to
Yeah,
start the engine.
yeah. But
Yeah.
I mean, when I was with Williams, they had. I mean, this is going back 2010, 11, I guess. You had the HRT team and the Manor team, and they were a customer of Williams, and they would buy the Kerr systems and the gearboxes from Williams. So
No kidding. I know
it's
that.
just because they're it's just because Haas are starting to do well that people are saying, oh, they're using all the Ferrari stuff. But
Well, I mean, they've been looking at for any reason to dog the Haas team since they've come on last year because they're American.
To a greater extent. Well, I think it's because that. And it is a difficult situation when you have teams, the likes of, your Force Indias, your Williams, your Toro Rossos. Well, they're not the best example because we just mentioned them, but Renaults, McLaren. These are guys that are spending a budget that is probably 2 or 3 times that of Haas, and are being beaten by Haas because Haas are. I don't want to use the word going against the spirit of the sport because it's in the rules and they're perfectly allowed to do what they do. But sometimes you've got to question it a little bit. I know I'd find it frustrating if I was at one of these other teams that is trying to push really hard.
Well, Richard, Richard, I don't want you to go too fast because you just hit a couple of different things. I'm gonna So what you're saying is the Haas team is basically what you're saying is the classical teams Force India and all the teams you just mentioned. They're pretty much making their own parts in house and everything. They're outsourcing the engine obviously unless they're a factory team. We know what they are, right? So. But you're saying that what Haas is doing is they're pretty much just buying all the pieces that they need. They're not developing anything in-house and just slapping a car together, paying 2 drivers and pushing them out there, kind of like an IndyCar situation.
It's a little bit more than that. There's more that's going on there. I know, I don't know the exact terms of it, but I know that they have a big deal with Dallara. And Dallara are like the sort of bespoke chassis manufacturing world motorsport. If you want a car building and you're not a big budget team, then you go to Dallara and Dallara will build it for you and design it for you. So a lot of the bodywork is coming from Dallara. A lot of the a lot of the chassis work and carbon fiber work, from my understanding, it comes from Dallara. A lot of the aero work does come from Ferrari. There is that link there. And the transmission, gearboxes, suspension systems, and come from Ferrari as well. So it's still a lot more involved than an IndyCar team, and that's not being just disrespectful to those guys. But
no, because IndyCar team is as spec as it's spec, but there's a lot you can do with the spec. It's not just spec for spec's sake. But it's spec for money saving sake, really. But but I know exactly what you mean. Yeah,
so they're not as bad. To put it bluntly, they're not as bad as what some of the teams are turning around and saying. I think that they're crowing a little bit because that's what they want to do. Now, if you go through, you look at some of the teams there, you also again have to put it into consideration of the situation. So. You look at last year, Haas openly admitted that they stopped development of their 2017 car relatively early in the season, and their performances throughout the season showed that. They tailed off.
Oh yeah.
Whereas guys like Force India and Williams and Renault and McLaren, they were pushing throughout the rest of the season.
Right.
So there's no doubt that probably Haas got a head start on all the other guys for their 2018 car, and it's showing. It's most definitely showing. Will
Yep.
Haas be able to develop their car at the rate so that they can stay in that position? I doubt it. I think Renault, McLaren definitely will start to push them, and especially by the time you get to the European season in Barcelona, I imagine that both Renault and McLaren will be pushing them. I imagine that you'll see Williams and Force India push them. So I think the disappointing and frustrating part from their end from this weekend just gone is that they had an opportunity to bank, a serious points haul, and then they turned away with nothing. They're probably not going to be in that position many more times this year. So they realise that they've missed a good opportunity here to really cash in on some serious points, but. That's not to take away from the job they've done. They've obviously done a very good job. They were good during winter testing, and they carried that on into the first race of the season. And it's a little bit frustrating. People call them a new team. They're 3 years old now. Back in the 1980s, that was a pretty well-established team. Formula One teams would come and go on a weekly basis, never mind a yearly basis.
Yeah, really.
So they're a pretty well-established teams. Those guys there know what they're doing. I mean, I watch the coverage at weekends, and I see guys in the Haas garage that I worked with 10, 15 years ago in Formula One. These guys have been around a long time. It's not like they've taken a load of college kids and go, "Hey, we need to build a Formula One car."
Yeah, I mean, and
they're pretty well established.
Did you watch that show 2 years ago?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, you could tell they had the right people.
I was going through. Oh yeah, know him. Oh yeah, worked with him. Oh, I remember. It's like
he's he's a. I can't say it. It's a clean show. But yeah.
It's not a. The money is so big these days in this sport that and Gene Haas, he's not stupid.
Yeah,
he's not going to put his
come
name
into
and his
F1 and be
reputation.
like, yeah, I'm going to throw down maybe $5 million on this investment.
Exactly.
No.
Yeah,
you're going to throw down your whole life.
He's going to do it properly.
Yeah.
He's not going to make himself look stupid.
Exactly.
So, no, I think it was. They've done well, and they've got to throw this. They've got to stop throwing and experts and pundits and people like that. They've got to stop throwing this. Oh, they're a new team. Concept down because they're not. Get over it. Come on, if they don't do well, criticize them. Tell them, hey, these guys didn't do well. Don't use they didn't do well because they're a new team excuse. It's been and gone in my book.
Yeah, they didn't do well. I mean, they were doing well. It's just
It's all part of the thing, though. I mean, there's for years, you talk to guys in this industry, and I've always had the concept, and it's a pretty well established one that to win a race, there's hypothetically 10 things you need to get right to win a race, and that doesn't matter whether it's NASCAR, IndyCar, Formula One, Le Mans, whatever it may be. There's 10 things you need to get right to win a race, and the big teams, the Penske's, the Ganassis, the Hendricks, the Joe Gibbs, the Ferrari, the Mercedes, the Red Bull, no matter what series you're in, of those 10, they will get 7 or 8 of those things right every week without fail, and it's just the little icing on the cake, for want of a better word, that distinguishes them between the rivals. And unfortunately, it's a harsh reality for Haas, but if they were running 15th and 17th, people would go, oh, that's not very good. Oh, look at Haas. Oh, they've messed that one up again. Whereas because they were running in the top 5 or 6, they were, making a big deal of it. When they've made a mistake, and they've got to get those things right. And
right.
I would say I don't have sympathy for them. I do, because they, it's galling to be in that position and to fall on something so trivial. But you take, these are the little things you got to take care of, and you're not, these are the foundations of victories and success. And if you get those wrong, you'll fall by the wayside.
My question is, who gives the signal to release them from the pits? Because, I mean, on the first one, there was the back tire changer. He held up his hands doing a little cross, and I guess he knew something was wrong. Yeah. And then the second time, it was like almost the entire side going, whoa, 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 don't let him go. And they just let him go. So who decides, like, I mean, because in IndyCar, there's a guy in front with his hand out saying no, or, go, go, go. So who's making that call? Like, you don't see the whole half of the side saying, yo, don't release him. Like,
yeah, no, you don't anymore. I mean, it's becoming so there's basically a light system on a pod above the car, and it varies from team to team. But the fastest way is to have sensors that are built into the guns, and as soon as the gun is disengaged, whether the nut's on or not, I mean, they're basically taking the concept that as soon as the gun is released, the nut is engaged, and there is a system that will check that all the parts are on and the car's down, and bang, the lights turn on. Obviously, you've got your two jack guys, on the front and the rear.
Which
they'll be watching.
The front guy is a maniac, by the way.
Oh yeah, yeah.
That's got to be insane.
Yeah, I've seen a few guys, go over, especially in testing when they're trying to, work on these systems. A few guys go over the front of the car a couple of times.
Oh, I can just imagine.
But a lot of it is automated, and it has to be to get these really, really fast times. You reduce, the human error. If you've got 3 or 4 humans involved in making the decision, that's a lot slower than if you've got 1 or 2, because
they got
pure
18.
reaction times. Yeah, and so it's all done electronically these days. So, and I don't know the HAS system. They may have something slightly different, but literally as soon as the tires go on, the cars are dropped while the nut is being engaged.
Oh yeah,
so
like they're
they don't wait. They don't wait for the nut to go on and then drop the car. It's sort of a fluid motion.
As soon as I see those tires flop right back on, they're like, all right.
Yeah, as soon as the tires are on, then you can be fastening that nut as the car hits the ground.
Yeah,
and as soon as the driver feels it, he'll go.
Yeah, because they're, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's one guy who takes it off, and there's another guy that puts it on. It's like,
Yeah, there's 3 guys per corner.
Right, so exactly.
The guy will take the tire off. You'll have nut off, tire on, nut on, and there's 3 guys that do that. And it's such a fluid motion that to get these like sub 2 second times that you've seen a few years ago, 1.89, 1.9 is the fastest time. So.
And that's like no twisting, no adjusting of the wings, no nothing.
Got to be spot on with it. So. Yeah. It was disappointing for those guys, obviously, but again, it's these little attention to details, and it'll become more and more apparent if they start, fighting at the sharp end of the grid. I say if it happened, and they were running 15th and 16th, nobody'd probably even noticed, really. It would obviously the notice, but there wouldn't have been this huge inquest into it.
I just want to throw out there that Alonso would have finished probably P7 if it didn't happen.
Yeah, and that's probably where that's probably where they deserve to be. And I think this sort of goes on to
they were definitely top 5, top 10 cars, definitely.
Oh yeah, no, without any doubt. And the information that you got over the winter from the 2 preseason tests in Barcelona probably showed that they were in the right sort of ballpark.
Romain Grosjean is not. He is a top 10 world-class driver. I mean, he's he's in top 10 overall in the world.
I would put him
down.
in the sort of, if you want to grade them, the sort of B minus sort of category guys. You've obviously got your Alonso's, Hamilton, and Vettels. I'd put Ricciardo in that group and Verstappen in that group. Then you've got your Bottas and your.
I would put Grosjean in front of Bottas.
I think they're on a similar level. And I'd put Raikkonen in there.
I love him.
Hulkenberg.
Kimi Raikkonen is. Racing. He's never really wowed me, but God, do I love him behind a mic. Oh
yeah,
he is fun for days, isn't he? Is he the funnest YouTube rabbit hole you could ever go down, or what?
Oh, he's he's brilliant.
Actually,
the very, very, very famous comment where he was not on the grid for the usual sort of driver introductions, and he was asked live on TV by one of the commentators, "Kimi, where have you been?" He explained in not too many words that he'd been for a bathroom break. It was a little bit more colourful than that.
How did he say it? I got it.
It was fantastic. That's Kimi through and through.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I just hope that he can have a really competitive season this year, because as a raw talent, I think he's he has the potential to be, up there competing with these guys. But
Oh yeah.
I,
Or
I
well,
just, I just wonder whether the
do you think
politics
he's
of
too old?
Ferrari are preventing him.
I mean, do you
I
think
think,
he's getting too old? Do you think? I
I
mean,
think so. I mean, I think you look at, um, yeah, I think it's just the politics of Ferrari. I think
you think he's like
he's
getting beaten down by the sport itself?
potentially. I mean, everybody
Okay.
knows that has sort of looked at any work that Kimi's done or any of the sort of interviews. He doesn't play the politics game in Formula One, and you have to. Um,
Or the media.
yeah, you look at somebody like Daniel Ricciardo. He's just like
You mean Ricciardo?
that's the guy. Um, he's the sort of media. He's brilliant for sponsors. If you could pick anybody, you'd
Oh
want
yeah,
Danny.
he's like the smiling, jolly jokester
Yeah,
guy. Yeah.
he's like almost like the Carl Edwards. When Carl Edwards was in NASCAR, he was brilliant with sponsors. And Danny is the same.
Or kind of like the
Kimi
Joseph
was such
Newgarden,
hard
Elio
work.
Castroneves maybe of
Yeah,
the
these
world.
sort of
We
guys.
we we
The
can
guys.
use IndyCar, references more maybe.
Okay, I'll try. I'll try.
I
But yeah,
know
you're
it's
right.
the world you're coming from. I just don't
Exactly.
know most of the people you're
But
coming
they're
from.
so media savvy, and they, to coin a
You
British
have to
phrase,
be.
they know which way their bread's buttered.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
like Rob Howden once told me. He said, drivers, what I look at in MRTI, because I was asking him because, we were starting to get into it. We were becoming friends with Rob, and I was asking him different questions here and there. And one question I asked him that really got him talking was, what's the best thing to look at a driver that you think could be an IndyCar, say when he's in USF 2000, right? And he
mhm.
goes, I look for three things. I look for um, he's got to have above all else. I mean, he has to have raw talent, natural talent. I mean, that's a must. He's like he goes as far as I'm concerned. I mean, if obviously there's people that race that don't have that, but they have the other two, which is money and media savvy, right?
Yep.
But he goes, but as far as I'm concerned, they have to have natural talent, but they also have to have a personality and a nice one, and they have to be able to go get the money. And I'm not saying that their talent will speak for them and get them the money, sanity, but uh, it's just not going to happen like that anymore. So,
Hmm.
and he was like, perfect example, Parker Thompson, right there is a perfect example of what I look for. And he will be an IndyCar soon enough because he's got the big threes, the big talent, the big personality that people like. And he works his butt off to get the sponsorship money he needs. And one way or another, he gets it every year. And he's proved it. So, and of course, his talent does have a lot to do with that. So one does help the other, and that is starting to become a little bit more true in motorsports. I've noticed a little bit,
Yeah.
not as more than it has been the last 5 years, but not as much as we need it to be, obviously. but but yeah, where did I jump? Oh yeah, but Kimmy, right?
Yep.
Kimmy, it seems like he's going to be able to stay at Ferrari as long as Vettel doesn't feel threatened by him.
Yeah, to a greater extent. Yeah, I mean, because you got to remember, when in Vettel's last season at Red Bull, he was outpaced
but
massively by Ricciardo.
and that's why he left. And then the year before
To a
that,
greater extent, yeah.
yeah, and the year before that, I mean, he pretty much drove Weber out.
Yeah. So, he and that's it's one of those things, and you look at you look back into the history of Formula One, look at guys like Fangio. I mean, he would just come and go to whichever team gave him the best car, and he was just a mercenary to fast cars. And to a certain extent, Vettel played that same game. He's like, well, I'm being beaten here. I'm going to go to somewhere where I'm not going to be beaten. And you can't blame the guy. He's got to make his own money. And in motor racing, if you can't beat your teammate, you're going to come second. You know.
Oh yeah, I mean,
So
yeah, that was like the biggest thing Justin Wilson like told us when we first had him on is was like the biggest difference between American style racing, open racing, all and European racing. Doesn't matter what you're racing. If you don't beat the guy who's in the garage next to you, you're a piece of, you know.
yep, basically, yeah. Oh
You
yeah,
you
yeah.
can you can finish 17th, but if But as long as the guy next to you finished 18th, you're a winner that day.
Yep. Then that's all you can be
and that's
compared about.
ridiculous.
Because the series, especially Formula One, is so car specific.
Exactly.
You are, at the end of the day, you are purely rated, against your teammate, and Vettel knew that, and he was being backed into a corner, and he did something about it. So
I guess you can't kill him for that, but
no, I mean, as I say, you go back into the history of sport, and guys like Fangio, I mean, you look at the number of teams he drove for. I mean, he won a number of championships. Was it 5? I think it was 5 championships. He each of those was a different manufacturer each year. He went to whoever was going to have the fastest car that year. So you can't knock the guy for it. He's got to make a career out of it, and that's what he wants to do.
Exactly. I mean, but the way I looked at it, like Red Bull, if it wasn't for Red Bull, he would never have made. Okay, maybe he would have made F1, but Red Bull pretty much threw him on their back and said, "We'll take you there, kid." And 4 championships later, he leaves because they got somebody who outpaced him by 0.02 of a second.
Yep. I mean, I think he came through the BMW driver development system, didn't he? Because he was at BMW Sauber. That was his first race when Kubica had his big accident in Canada and missed a race. When he had his bell severely rung by that wreck.
That was back in like 2009?
Yeah, 2009, because I think 10 was Vettel's first full
10,
season
11,
with,
12, 13 he did, right?
Toro Rosso.
Yeah.
Maybe it was 8. I'm trying to
yeah,
remember
I think
now.
it was 8 because he won 4 and they were all in a row.
Yeah.
And it was 9, 10, 11, and 12.
No, it's 10, 11, 12, 13. Because 9 was Braun.
Gotcha. I mean, like, to be honest, like me personally, I didn't get really back into racing hardcore, like open wheel, until about 2008, 2009, when IndyCar became a unified sanction body again. Because I had a big hissy fit about the split, and I bailed. I wouldn't watch the thing. So, but when I came back,
so Vettel's first race, was in 2007. Yeah. And then so that was with BMW Sauber and he became the youngest driver to score a point on his debut.
Yeah.
And then later in the year, he was picked up by Red Bull and Toro Rosso. Spent a season with Toro Rosso, won in Monza, the Italian Grand Prix in the rain. And then
which has Hamilton won that yet? Still,
Hamilton won in Monza.
Did he?
I'm pretty certain he has. Yeah, I'm pretty certain Hamilton's won Monza.
Because I thought Hamilton still has never won Monza, but I guess he did last year.
There's one race he hasn't won. I'm pretty certain.
Isn't Silverstone? No, he's
won Silverstone.
I think he's never not won at Silverstone.
Yes.
No, but it's a big race that it still hasn't won. Is it the Red Bull Ring? No.
They've only been back there a couple of times since it got redone. I know.
Well, hold that thought, because I have the Kimi Räikkönen interview from yesterday. Oh my God, guys! Wait till you hear this. This is gold. I really hope it comes through all right. If it doesn't, or if it's too loud, guys, tell me. All right, because I'm doing this cold.
Well, of course, it could have been a few places better, but I think the speed was pretty decent and not the most luckiest with the safety car, but that's how it goes, and it was for our team. So, it's not ideal to be a third, but I think the feeling has been pretty decent. So that's the main thing, and it's only the first race. We have pretty awful racing to be done this year. So
You say it's only the first race, but we heard your frustration with the team over when you came out of the pits and they hadn't told you to push at a time when you needed that. Is that a disappointment to you that the team hadn't kept you abreast of the situation?
No, obviously we have had some changes, and it made not absolute zero difference, but in certain situations it could make. So we just need to be sharp to inform, and maybe it was very obvious for them, and they would have told if I would have slowed down to go faster, so we were absolutely safe on that. But I rather know. So there was no,
What?
Too late is too late. So, but today made no difference whatsoever.
Now, Daniel Ricciardo,
He's brilliant.
That was English. I swear.
Just about, yeah.
I need subtitles. I don't know what he said. Does anybody else? Did you guys hear that pretty well?
No, he wasn't. He's just waiting for his next ice cream or something, isn't he?
I know. Ice cream. Oh my God, Missy, thoughts?
He's Kimi Räikkönen.
I know. What else could you say?
I seen him at when they were doing their champagne spray, and I think Sebastian Vettel was about to spray it with champagne. He put his hand out. He's like, no.
Yeah, drink it.
Don't even
I don't
spray
do
me
the
with that.
champagne. Don't you spray me, you pieces. Never mind. No, don't get me wet. I don't get wet because then I gotta dry myself off, and then I gotta change my shirt, and I hate changing my shirt because once I put my shirt on, it just feels nice and cozy. I don't like it takes those off because I feel
You
good.
could almost fall asleep in the middle of the interview.
I know. It was like Kimmy. So what happened? Why didn't you win? Somebody else did.
Yep.
What?
Yeah, I zone out on him. I really do.
I don't. He is gold. And I don't care. Whenever that guy opens his mouth and talks, that's gold. That was long for Kimmy right there. That was really long for Kimmy.
Oh yeah.
That was a. He was in a good mood right there. That's happy Kimmy right there. It's hard to tell. I know. It's like I finished behind Vettel, so I guess I'm doing my job. Don't want to lose it. If I start beating him, I'm going to be out of here real quick.
What killed me during this broadcast? When Sebastian Vettel pitted, and then he came out in front of Hamilton. The commentators were going like crazy. They're like, "Oh yeah, Vettel took over first, and this is he's the new leader." And I'm like, I'm pretty sure he's been the leader.
Yeah, how can he be the new leader while he pits under green?
I rewound my DVR because I'm just like, I thought he was already leading. These guys are acting like he just took the lead, and I was like, was Hamilton really leading? Was I not watching this race enough? Right, so I had to rewind, and I did, and I'm just like, son of a bitch, he's been leading since not 19. What are you talking about? Like,
I think it was on the pit stop strategy, wasn't it? I think if the pit stop strategy had gone to how you'd expected it, he would have come out third. But I know what you mean. Yeah, obviously before that safety car period and the virtual safety car sort of screw up.
So that's pretty much happened, right? The virtual safety car came out. Hamilton hit it, had to slow down because Hamilton probably would have took the lead if that didn't happen. So Hamilton wanted to know why he didn't pit the lap before that Vettel did, and when he was asking his team that,
Hamilton, because I think at one point Räikkönen was in second.
Yes.
And Hamilton. What Hamilton wanted to know when Räikkönen was pitting, so he pitted the same time as Räikkönen did. And then that's how Sebastian Vettel was able to take over because Lewis Hamilton pitted and Vettel stayed out for a while longer.
Oh, okay. So all that
so
was...
Hamilton pitted, I'm going to say, around about lap 16, 17, I think. In the teens, anyway.
He was 19.
19, yeah.
I think it was 19.
Then Vettel stayed out, and as you rightly say, was leading the race, but only by half a dozen seconds or so, not a huge gap there. And under normal circumstances, if it had been, to coin a phrase, green flag racing, he would have pitted and come back in third.
Yeah. Hamilton would have been by him
or so behind
exactly.
Hamilton. Now, what caught them out was when the virtual safety car comes out. The way that works is they have split times that they have to adhere to all around the track. And I think there's 20 segments around the track, and they have a delta which they have to drive to, which is shown on their steering wheel. And
do they hit a button, like a limiter, to make them do that? Or?
There's a system which is like a two-way system between the car and the FIA. So the FIA sort of enables that limit, and the drivers have to control it themselves. And there's a little bit of leeway, but not much. They've got to be pretty close on it. I mean, these guys are pretty good. They know what they're doing. That's my understanding of how that system works. So in theory, all the gap, when you have a full safety car, obviously everybody bunches up like you do in NASCAR and IndyCar. You go behind the pace car and the whole field bunches up.
Yep.
They want to try and avoid doing that in Formula One as much as possible because the concept in Formula One is that's manipulating the race a little bit.
What, with a safety car?
Yes. Their attitude is, well, if you
or is that because of what Vettel did to Hamilton in where was that? Baku?
Well, yeah, I mean, the actual virtual safety car system came about
After Jules Bianchi, yeah.
following Jules Bianchi's accident. Yes, yeah. So they wanted a system because what Jules was doing was he was trying to catch the safety car, so he was going. There was no limit. He was going flat out in the rain, and unfortunately,
I know
lost
40,
control and
it was like 39 seconds. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, and he hit
terrible.
Hit a crane. So
the
crane
the idea
that was
is picking up his teammate right where his teammate went off in the same corner. Yeah, terrible.
So the idea of the virtual safety car is it like freezes the field, and the gaps that you have between each car stays the same. Now the problem you have is that on the timing loops, the pit lane entry and the pit lane exit are not part of this timing loop system. So the reason Vettel got ahead of everybody was that as soon as he entered pit lane, he was out of this controlled speed limit. So he could go, I mean, we were only talking a few 100 yards, but he could go flat out for that time period, go through the pit lane at probably similar speed to what the rest of the cars are doing on track, 100 kilometers an hour probably, go through his pit stop, exit, right. And then as soon as he leaves the pit lane, again, he can go as fast as he likes until he officially rejoins the track. Then he's back into this virtual safety car zone.
Wait, so, time out though. There's no speed limit on pit lane in F1?
There is, but from so you have two parts of the pit lane. You have the pit lane entry and exit, and you also have the actual pit lane itself, which is where the speed limit is.
Oh,
so the speed limit is down pit lane, but on the section of track that is considered pit entry, that is not the virtual safety car doesn't apply on pit entry and pit exit until you rejoin the track.
Oh, I got
so
you.
Vettel was able to go far faster than Hamilton and Raikkonen for those few hundred yards, but because they were, that was enough for him to get out ahead of them and to stretch that lead as he entered pit lane, not lose as much going down pit lane at his speed limit because the guys on track are doing the same speed limit.
Right.
And then he had that few hundred yards an exit where, again, he could go as fast as he liked. So,
yeah.
And Hamilton's issue with the team that you had on the radio was that from a strategy point of view, all of these things are known about. It wasn't a surprise. Nobody at Mercedes was going, oh, good grief, I can't believe Vettel did that. They know because they would have done exactly the same in the same situation.
Of course.
So, obviously, the strategy guys work on their deltas. Have we sort of disabled the undercut? Have we disabled the overcut? What if there's a safety car? Are we in a safe zone if there's a safety car from somebody pitting? Hamilton hadn't cleared the virtual safety car pit window, and his gripe was that the teams hadn't used all the tools available to him to tell him, hey, look, you need to push for 2 or 3 laps in case there's a virtual safety car.
Oh wow! Okay,
get us out ahead of them, and
it's like Lewis. We have 3 geometrists hard at work in the back right now. I mean,
yeah.
I was unclear why he was upset because he said, "Why wasn't I told that Vettel was pitting?" And I'm just like, "Well, what difference would it have made? Like, you couldn't have went any faster."
Exactly. Well,
and plus you were going off of Kimi, so
yeah. Up to that point, before the virtual safety car came out, he could have been told, we need to gain, you're 2 seconds out of the virtual safety car pit window, but he wasn't ever told that. And team
isn't that driver coaching?
Which is allowed now.
Yeah, which I was wondering if it was or not. I thought so. Okay.
No, they had this thing a few years ago where they banned it, and then they sort of there's a lot of code words going around, and they ended up allowing it again, which was
Now here is my biggest question. Like, out of the entire weekend, how on earth do you incur a 3-spot pit penalty during a practice?
So again, similar sort of concept to the virtual safety car system. When during that practice session, there's a red flag because one of the timing loops had actually started to come away from the track surface, which is incredibly dangerous. I mean, if somebody had hit that,
oh geez, are you kidding?
You would have made a real mess.
Oh yeah.
So red flagging the session was the only thing they could have done. Now again, no matter where you are on the track, back in the old days, for want of a better word, you just go as fast as you want back to pit road.
Right.
Pit lane. There's my NASCAR coming in again. Got to stop that. Sorry. So back to pit lane. So what they, and that was obviously dangerous because there's a red flag for a reason. You could have marshals, ambulances, medical guys, whatever on the track. You don't want that. So when this virtual safety car came in, they said, look, rather than just the you need to slow down rule, these are delta targets which you have to hit. Getting back to pit lane, safely. And the idea is that you can react at that speed rather than going flat out. And by sounds of things, from what I understand, Ricciardo missed one of those segments, and it was the reason he only got a 3-place penalty is because it was deemed that he had slowed down. He just hadn't slowed down enough. Going back
it seems very nitpicky to me by the FIA to do that. I don't know.
Well, that's what I heard. I heard he slowed down, but he didn't slow down enough, and then something else happened. He slowed down too much at another point or something.
Well, yeah, it could be that, again, I don't know without seeing the data and knowing exactly what it is.
Exactly, and that was the problem with the broadcast. They didn't tell you either.
No. So it was a little bit, meh. Yeah, that was frustrating, but I know we wanted to sort of go and try and sort of spend a little bit of time looking at each individual team, what we've seen through pre-season into this weekend. And I think it's a good point to pick up here now with Red Bull. Even if he hadn't had that 3-place penalty, it still wouldn't have made any difference. That was about where they were. They're, to my mind, you've got Mercedes are still the class of the field.
Of course.
It's frustrating. Toto Wolff was, of course, the first one to cry when Red Bull dominated, and Christian Horner thought Red Bull dominating was great, and now Mercedes are dominating. Toto Wolff thinks it's great, and Christian Horner's bleating. So it's like, come on, guys.
And then they're all criticizing, what's his name, Newey or whatever his name is.
Adrian Newey.
Yeah, Adrian, they're all criticizing him.
Yeah. So, you see the Mercedes car, it's the dominant car again.
Plus, it's a factory car. I mean, come on.
You're always going to have that bonus.
Red Bull's not a factory team, so...
No, I mean, if you look at the comment during one of the comments during the race, somebody mentioned that Haas employ around about 215, 220 people. They said Mercedes have that number of people on vacation at any one time, which is, they've probably got a good 1,000 people plus throughout the engine and the chassis department to take that team to the track every weekend. They have over 100 people at each race.
And that's why they always say in F1, it's like, how fast do you want to go? Well, how much do you want to spend?
And this is something that I'm sure the guys that listen to the Drafting the Circuits podcast get fed up for me saying, but it's a business. And like any business, you go into it to get a return. Yes, it's a sport and it's an entertainment industry, but at the end of the day, the reason Mercedes are in this sport is to sell cars.
Exactly.
They're road cars. So if they put 100 million, 200, 300, whatever, however many hundreds of millions of dollars a year into that sport, that's how much they want to get out of it. And to do that, they want to be winning.
And plus the innovations that they're going to come out with and use are pretty insane if you can just understand what you're seeing.
To a certain extent, I mean, this is a story sort of
when I see a Mercedes take a 5G load all the way to its left and transfer it, that's pretty remarkable to me.
Oh, it is. But in reality, the sort of outside use of that is pretty limited. I mean, obviously the car manufacturers, they turn around and say, oh, well, we're doing this because it innovates for our road car products. And that's not the case.
That's what WC's for.
Yes. But as a sort of, you're very right, yeah. As a sort of a third or a second-hand story, anyway. Going back to when the KER systems were first developed in Formula One, like 2008, 9, I think it was.
You mean the thing they still won't let us see?
Yeah.
I don't know why.
Williams were running the Toyota engine, and Williams developed their own battery-based KER system. They were one of the first to really develop that system. And sort of, again, a second-hand story. Toyota obviously had their Prius and their hybrid systems around, and some of the engineers from Toyota came to Williams to look at their battery technology, And they were like, yeah, you're like 5 years behind us. Um,
Uh,
now the thing with motorsport is their development cycles and their learning curves are far faster than industry. I'm in a position at the moment where I'm actually doing some contract work for a commercial truck manufacturer, and it's
oh, cool.
amazing how anything ever gets done. It is so slow compared to motorsport.
Oh, yeah, of
So
course.
obviously they can react a lot faster to what you see, in the commercial side. But it's purely
And plus, they
motorsport
can test everything a whole lot more under a whole lot more stress doing it through
for
racing
sure,
than they
for
can do it
sure.
through that machine that just bumps the car up and down 1,000 times.
Exactly. So, you look at Mercedes and you look at Red Bull, Ferrari to a greater extent, and all of these companies which are involved in motorsport, they are doing it pure and simply to make money.
Yep.
So when they invest money, they want a return on it, and they want to be successful. They don't want to, and they also they want to reduce the odds, basically, of being successful. And that the way you reduce the odds in motorsport is to spend money. So that's why you're seeing the likes of Mercedes dominate, because they have by far and away the biggest budgets.
Oh, by far. I mean, you see
you-
more Mercedes on the road than anything else, than Ferraris or
Yeah.
McLarens or Honda. Well, okay, not Hondas, but that's only one team. But I mean, Renaults, they don't exist over here.
No.
Not to my knowledge, anyway. Maybe
Well,
maybe
they're
trucking.
through well, no, I mean they're part of the Volvo
Oh,
and
there you
Mack
go.
Truck group.
Yeah, see, like I
Um,
would have to Google all that stuff and really like
but yeah,
dive
no,
into all that,
you're
but I
right.
never
There's
have.
no Renault have no commercial exposure in the US.
Exactly. Yeah, I guess it's a better way to put it. Yeah.
But you're in a business here, and they want returns on their investment. So
Sure.
it's a difficult game. You've got to sort of play the game from a sporting point of view. You've got to appease them. You've got to say, yeah, guys, we know you're putting $500 million in a year, so yeah, you want to win, and if you don't win, you're going to pull out. But we need you in the sport, so you've got to massage the egos a little bit. But you cannot knock Mercedes. At the end of the day, they have produced a very, very good car, very, very good engine, and
they've secured the top talent in the
yes.
Yeah.
Everybody
Yeah.
criticized Hamilton or said that Hamilton was taking a risk when he went there, but they were in the process. As you saw with Schumacher in the late 90s, they were in the process of building this team of engineers and of technical directors and managers and people to build that team around guys like Hamilton.
And not to mention, it was a Ferrari factory team, and and they had Marlboro.
Yeah,
So
they had the money.
They had endless amount of money. So that
Exactly. So yeah, it's very mirror image to what you said. That, and again, we sort of look at Red Bull, very very similar situation. I mean, the reason that they got involved in Formula One originally as a team owner was that they wanted more exposure in Asia, and Formula One's massive over in Asia. Red Bull as a drink, they're basically a fizzy drink manufacturer.
I've never had a Red Bull. I mean, I've tasted one before. I'm not a big fan.
No,
It's like a handful of Smarties.
Yeah,
the only
just
thing
too
the only
much.
thing Red Bull's good with is vodka, but
Nice.
that takes me back. Yeah. Anyway, sorry.
To 2 days ago?
Oh no. Sensible, responsible adult now.
Oh,
wait.
sure,
No.
sure.
Yeah, no. So they get in it from a commercial point of view, and again, they want to be successful and they want a return on their investment. And I think one of the things that's really souring Red Bull, I think, in Formula One is the way that they are treating Renault. Yeah, Renault aren't Mercedes. They're not the great engine money. They haven't got this great engine that the Mercedes group have been able to put out. But it's just part of the cycle. And oh goodness me, the guy who used to do the pit lane reporting for NBC, was it Will Buxton?
Yes.
I think that's the guy's name. Yeah, I thought he was great at asking the questions that need to be asked. So a couple of years ago, when Renault were really struggling with these hybrids and they were like dropping out of races left, right, and centre, and Christian Horner was sat on his soapbox and he was calling them out at every possible, opportunity.
I mean,
Will
they
Buxton.
they rebranded the freaking engine for crying out loud.
A competitor, a competitor engine manufacturer. Yeah. But Will Buxton, sold Christian Horner a fantastic couple of questions. He said, "So Christian, with these problems you are going through right now, what percentage of the performance deficit to Mercedes is Red Bull, and what percentage is Renault?" He's like, "Oh, it's 80% Renault and 20% Red Bull. Renault are terrible. They know it." Oh, okay. So those 4 World Championships you won, what percentage of that was Renault and what percentage of that was Red Bull? He's like, well, that's a different situation. I thought it was. He just lined him up brilliantly. And,
because it is so true. It's like, how can
Yeah.
you curse the guy that got you what he
Exactly.
and I guess they're still bitter about the Vettel thing, I suppose. But now they got
Potentially.
yeah,
And
but now they got Verstappen.
that's another sort of interesting dynamic that I think we're going to see play out throughout the year. And if I was a betting man, I would put a small little wager that come 2019, those Red Bull cars will have a Honda engine in the back of them.
You think so?
I think they will. I've worked with Honda in the past, and Honda, when they commit to something, they typically succeed. They're not a culture that quits and gives up and walks away. They could have so easily turned around after the McLaren debacle and turned around and said, "You know what, guys, we're done. It didn't work. Thanks for coming." But no, they've gone, and actually Toro Rosso, I think, have done a great thing, because I'm sure they're getting far more backing from Honda than they ever got from Renault.
Well, from anybody. Toro Rosso's getting like 100%.
I'm sure they're probably getting those engines for free.
It's like, hey, people care we exist. All right.
Yeah, and that Honda engine, it's not up there with the Renault, with the other, but it's no slouch this year. They were pretty bulletproof throughout pre-season testing, and of course they get to the first race and have an issue. But I expect to see, Toro Rosso climb the grid throughout the season. They're not going to be competing with the likes of, the big three, as I see them at the moment, Mercedes, Ferrari, and Red Bull, but they could certainly be in that mid-pack hunt, because I think that's going to be so dynamic throughout the year. I mean, we mentioned it earlier. Obviously, Haas are like the leaders of that midfield pack at the moment, almost sort of broken away a little bit. But I personally can't see them staying there throughout the rest of the season, because I think the likes of Renault and McLaren will definitely improve. I think that you'll see Toro Rosso improve. You could potentially also see Force India get back up to where they've been in the last few years. And personally, I'd like to see Williams, improve. So it wouldn't surprise me if come the end of the season you don't see Haas sort of, around that sort of 10th to 12th place rather than the 5th to 6th place. I think they'll start to struggle a little bit as everybody catches up with them, because, if you take the car now that, they ran Melbourne with this last week, and then you take the car to Melbourne that they ran Abu Dhabi with, from an aerodynamics perspective, probably the Sauber will be pretty close to where Mercedes are now. That's maybe a little bit of an exaggeration, but there's at least a second to probably a second and a half of development in those cars from some of the mid-pack teams anyway. So, I think
and they're all getting it out of the arrow that they come up with. That's why they always look a little bit different than the rest. Like Missy, you noticed something about the arrow on say one of the teams, right?
Oh yeah, well McLaren, and I noticed it on another team too, and I can't remember the team
Ferrari.
now.
Was it Ferrari or was it Force India? Or no, it was Toro Rosso maybe. I don't know. I did see it on the.
I don't know, but the McLaren had it looked like 3 vents. There was another team that had it looked like 2.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Ferrari had it wasn't, they didn't have multiple vents. They had 1 at the top where you could see in between, I guess. So, and there was a couple that there was one, I can't remember which team it was, but they had little spikes sticking up on their halo. So I don't know what they were really supposed to do.
I think Toro Rosso and Haas have these little, I guess the technical word is turning vanes that you'd have on the halo, which sort of control the vortexes coming off the halo and can shape the air around the around the engine cover so it can interact with the rear of the car a little bit better. But a lot of teams have struggled with cooling throughout the winter. McLaren had issues with their radiator and cooling in pre-season testing, so I think they got quite aggressive with basically cutting holes in their bodywork to help cool the engine and the turbos, because these things do get pretty hot.
Yeah, I mean, like, I was watching a YouTube channel. I forget what it was called, but they were showing it was Real Engineering, and he was showing like the different air vortexes that the new uh, aero kits that Mercedes has compared to last year's, and he was doing like a graph side by side, and you could tell where there's these new vortex that would come through and like wrap around the side of the car and then hit the bottom
Yep.
pan right behind. Like, it was crazy how like
Yep.
this little zoop in the front
I mean,
of
a
the
lot of
car
these,
makes a
a lot of
gigantic
these
amount of
little,
downforce in the back.
yeah, I mean, a lot of these little vanes and winglets and bits that you look at, like, I think, what is that doing there? Very few of them actually generate downforce. A lot of them are air handling
Or
sculptures. So that
or it's like it's just to deflect over the tires or something like that, or
yeah, it's to move air around and put it in a place where it is most efficient. I mean, the
right,
majority of the downforce on these cars does come from the rear of the car, so the rear
right.
rear wing and the rear diffuser. So what you want is you want the air to be able to control the air in as reliable way as possible around the bodywork and around the side pods and around the engine cover to get it to interact with the rear diffuser as best as possible. Obviously, the front wing does generate downforce, but a lot
But
of
just
those
for the
little
front tires, yeah.
yeah, a lot of those
I mean,
little
it's
winglets
like
and end
half.
plates.
Yeah, I mean, it's like half front grip and then half deflection to
Yeah,
other parts.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't know the exact numbers, but yeah, you're right. A lot of those little intricacies don't generate downforce. They move the air around and put it into a place where it can be designed to work. So that's why
yeah, it's pretty
a lot of
interesting.
people are like, well, why don't people just copy a Mercedes front wing and stick it on their car, because they've got the technology to do it these days with photographs and all this sort of stuff.
Sure,
And he said, well, it probably make the car 2 seconds a lap slower because it's moving the air into the wrong place. And
exactly,
so many things that you
exactly.
don't see in the car that control the performance and the handling. That
And that's F1's problem, is not conveying this to the general audience to make them understand this kind of stuff.
yeah, it's difficult. I mean, I don't understand half of it, and I work in.
I know, that's my point. And it's just
Um,
like, it's gotten so technical now. It's like,
yeah,
you need to, like go to your nearest community college and sign up for a course in modern aerodynamics, and yeah.
you know about 10% of it. Yeah, but
Exactly.
but that's the problem. It goes back to the original. The topic we were discussing earlier. It's all about the money. These teams, if they want results, will invest money in engineering and invest money in these wind tunnels and CFD and all of these technologies and simulators and stuff that would just blow people's minds away if they ever saw it, to have an advantage over the competition. And as the regulations get tighter, what happens is the margin for improvement gets smaller as well.
Right.
So when you have a new set of aero regulations, for example, to find half a second may cost $20 million.
Sure.
Now that $20 million will find you a tenth of a second, because you don't have those big areas to pick out. It's like in NASCAR. When NASCAR really got into their aerodynamics a few years ago, you could go to an hour's wind tunnel session and find, a day's wind tunnel session of like 12 hours and find like 20-30% downforce gain because it was so easy. Whereas now, you do the same amount of time and you're getting 1 or 2% gains because to coin a phrase, you're picking off the low hanging fruit.
Right.
And that's why when you have a big regulation change, you typically do see a shake up in the grid because some people get it and others don't, and it takes time for the people that didn't get it to react and learn these new techniques. And
I mean, to make it relatable, it's kind of like what IndyCar is going to pretty much deal with for the first half of this season because of what they just did, Like, I mean,
yes,
look at how many people didn't know what they were doing with the car and how many people did. I mean,
Yeah.
Was it a fluke that uh, who was it that was Wickens that was in front? I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe they
Oh,
just got the
that
setup
kid's
right.
good.
He's
Watching
definitely
him in
good.
Europe and
But yeah, he
come
came
through the
from
Mercedes
DTM.
family,
Exactly.
DTM,
Exactly.
he can pedal, that kid. So it wasn't a huge surprise, and he's been in lots of different cars as well. So it wasn't like it was a complete fluke. But
No,
no,
definitely not. But
it,
but that's what I mean. It's like yeah. I just wish like the regular fan could really understand a little bit more. I think, but
and
then
it's
again,
difficult.
the teams I don't think want to release all that much because then they don't want to give their secrets away to the other teams. So it's all like you don't find out
Exactly.
about what they really did until the next year because by then it doesn't matter anyway.
Yeah. I mean, you almost, we talked about, how do you make it fair? Do you almost have like after every race, one car is impounded and every other team's allowed to look at it? And
There
that's done
is.
at random. Would that help? I don't know.
Oh! You're saying like a lottery almost, like a
Almost. So at the end of the race,
or like how about the winner? Whoever wins, everybody has to look at your
yeah,
car.
because then but then you can manipulate it. Then you can say, well,
What people
we've
aren't
got
going to
this
want to win?
we've got this, we've got this golden bullet in our car, which is going to make us really, really quick. And no, we don't want to win this race, so we'll, sandbag. And then suddenly they'll unleash it, and so I think you do it at random. I think you have a system where at the end of the race you draw a ball out of a hat, and whoever gets picked, everybody, a technical representative from each team can have half an hour with the car, and that sounds bad.
For some reason, Max
that a little bit better.
Max Verstappen will be picked every time.
Yes.
I guarantee it. He's got the worst luck in F1.
Well, but then what you do is if you got picked out, then for the next race you wouldn't be picked.
Oh,
You
I see what you mean.
So
Okay.
after 10 races, everybody's had a chance to look at everybody's car.
That is true. I guess on average, yeah, sure, because you got to.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. It would, just an idea. Just an idea.
But would it translate to the fans actually finding out too, or would it just be the teams? Like that. That's kind of what I'm getting at.
This is difficult because not to sound.
Maybe they should get maybe ESPN should get like a more like of a technical guy like in the studio to actually, teach the viewing audience what they're actually looking at.
The problem is these days. I mean, it's not like you had in the 70s when you had guys like Colin Chapman that would design the whole car themselves. You've got 200-300 engineers designing these cars, and each person is responsible for such a small, minute part of the car that there's not one person would know all of it. And
that's true.
And again, not trying to sound, disrespectful to anybody, but I'm an electronics engineer. I only really understand the electronics on these cars. I don't understand the aerodynamics and the suspension geometries and all this sort of stuff. So to relate that to the average fan, you'd probably just confuse them. And that's not being, funny about it. It's just the way it is.
Yeah, no, I totally get it.
You need to be able to engage with them and interact with them. But these cars, I mean, if you watched some of the onboard shots from Hamilton, I mean, he was like, it was almost like he was trying to order a pizza on his steering wheel. I mean, he was
really
doing so much stuff. And it's like, you're supposed to be driving.
It's like, yes, to start the car, hit this, do this.
Yeah.
Wiggle back and forth.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
And,
there's a huge amount of stuff that goes into it. So,
he doesn't need to see the track anyway. I mean, he's got that halo now. They can't see anything.
Yeah, the coverage is terrible. I mean, like that.
Well, if you looked
camera,
at some of the onboard cameras, some of the onboard cameras were in a good position. I think, like Williams, for instance, their camera was in a good position, but like Max Verstappen's camera was. I don't know where they put the damn thing. It was just I could see was the halo, and I was just like, really, really, guys.
With that, there are actually regulations which limit where they can put the camera. So as a team,
that's what I was trying to tell you.
Yeah, I mean, as a team, you have to provide. I think there's 6 mounting points on the car, maybe 8. I can't remember now. 6 or 8 mounting points on the car where, at any given week, the FIA can mount a camera, and they're written into the technical regulations. So one of the problems there is that maybe this was slightly overlooked, but if they suddenly turn around and be like, okay, well, we want to move the camera, they can't move the camera until next year because of the technical regulations.
Right.
Even if there's an agreement amongst the teams to, hey, look, we need to do something about this now. So I think what you're going to see going forward now is there's going to be a lot more nose-mounted cameras.
Yeah, probably.
Looking forward, because that halo does.
It's
you've
terrible.
got. And I mean, one thing that amazes me is that considering how commercially active this sport is, nobody's put damn sponsorship on these halos. The only one that's really done anything with it is McLaren.
And Force India with flip flops.
Yeah, I thought it was McLaren that had done the flip flops.
There's
It
two
was
teams.
Force India and McLaren.
Oh, they've both done it. Okay.
Yep.
So it's...
and like I wanted to go out and get a bunch of different colors of flip flops and then set them up as a grid. And then Missy's like, "Look, somebody beat you to it," and she showed me a tweet of somebody had already done it. I was like, darn it! But I mean, they did it digitally. I wanted to go out and actually buy them and then set them up on like the road, and like it would be way too involved, to be honest with you. And it would come out terrible, really, because I would need probably like a 20-foot scaffolding to take the picture, I suppose. So it wouldn't work. Or I'd probably jump on top of my house and then point. See what I mean? Like, this is how far I would go with it, where somebody else just kind of got, screenshots of different colored flip flops and photoshopped them into a grid. Much easier, it's still comedically funny.
Yeah. But one of the things that I sort of commented on, mentioned this a few times, is it can be hard enough as it is to distinguish drivers at the best of times. Just off from the helmet.
Yeah.
And now they've got this halo in which, I mean, you're pretty much used to it already by now. I don't think it's the eyesore to a certain extent that people had expected. But
I think
why
at first it was.
Yeah, why don't they allow them to have the halo? The drivers design their own halo design. That it distinguishes between them and the teammates, because at least it would give them, a way of, just.
It doesn't change the car.
Distinguishing them from from the others, because sometimes I can't even see the numbers because they're going by so fast. I'm like, I can't see what number that is. I just know it's a McLaren because it's orange, or red because it's Red Bull, or silver because it's Mercedes,
And then the eagle eyes have to pick out the helmet color or the design, because that's about all the drivers get to do to personalize anything. So that's a good idea. The halos are there for safety, and that's it. Who cares what color they are? I mean, obviously Force India doesn't. So because look at the rest of their car. So have them paint or do whatever they want with it.
Yeah, let the drivers do something with them so it can help us distinguish them.
Yeah, I mean, like a flag or something, that might get a little bit confusing at times, but,
should write their name on the side of it.
Something. Do something. But they look, I don't know. But that's a good
idea. We're always crying out for more interaction between the drivers and the fans, so here's a perfect opportunity.
So, I guess the last really two teams we really haven't touched on is Sauber and pretty much Force India. So, where do you think? So Sauber has a Ferrari customer, and Force India's got the Mercedes customer. How much now? Between Sauber and Force India, how do you think there's more Mercedes involved with Force India than there are Ferrari with Sauber, or vice versa? Or none of the above?
I think it's both. I think they're both separated a little bit. I think what you've seen with Sauber is there's obviously been a changing of guard there. With midway through last year, they had the Honda deal, and then Manisha Kettlebun was dismissed from her role as team principal, and they've now gone back to Ferrari. So there's obviously been a lot of unrest within the Sauber team, and hopefully that Ferrari will provide, the Ferrari deal will provide them a little bit of stability. Where you see Peter Sauber as the sort of figurehead, a bit in the similar sort of role to Frank Williams. He's never somebody that's going to sell the soul of his team.
Right.
He's never going to become a Ferrari B team like you see with Haas, which is maybe why Ferrari have got so involved with Haas, because they didn't get that with
Sauber. I got you.
With Sauber, so they've sort of separated themselves a little bit there.
Okay.
Then you look at the Force India side, again, they to a certain extent want to do things themselves, and I think they do have Mercedes have a pretty hands-off arrangement. Now, I'm sort of casting my mind back to when Williams got the Mercedes deal back in 13, I think it was, maybe 14. 2014 was the first year they had Mercedes.
Was it after BMW?
No, that was after Renault.
Right.
They were BMW, then they went to Toyota, then they went to Renault, and then they went full circle. They went to Mercedes. But
that's right, the Toyota thing. That was like
the terminology of it was that it was a technical partnership between Mercedes and Williams, whereas Force India was a technical alliance. So I think at the time, Mercedes and Williams were interacted a little bit more, whereas Force India, they just got delivered an engine and
dropped off the block, like, here you go, see ya.
Pretty much.
Okay,
but
fair
I
enough.
believe that now the rules have been changed a little bit, I think, so to prevent that sort of from happening. So every customer team has to have the same specification engine and the same specification of software as the manufacturer team. So if Mercedes turn up with a certain version of software, they have to make that available to all of their other teams.
Is that like just recent?
That's for this season, maybe last season as well, but definitely for this season.
Because I remember like 2 seasons ago they were saying how all the customer engines were like 10 horsepower faster than the
and when I was at Williams, we had a little bit of that.
Right. Okay.
There's rumors that Mercedes were saying, well, you got to, when we were getting close to Mercedes and pushing them, they turn around and say, oh, you got to run this cooling package because your engine's going to overheat, and if you don't run this cooling package, we're not going to, support you.
And by the way, this cooling package weighs you down and takes 10
exactly,
horsepower.
Yeah, it increases drag, blah blah blah. Now, again, I don't know, don't quote me on that, but those are the sort of things which were happening.
No, it makes perfect sense.
So I think the thing you look at, you look at some cars, and one thing I've always said about a racing car is if it looks simple, it's typically fast. If it looks elegant and there's not lots of little bits hanging off it, you're like, okay, yeah, that's a decent car because they don't have to add all these things to it. You look at the Sauber.
That's why I like Williams. It's so basic looking.
To a certain extent. And you look at the Sauber, and I remember the first time when they launched it, a lot of people, oh, look at this Sauber, it's got all these winglets and all these trick bits of aero and all this sort of stuff, and it's like, yeah, that's probably not a good sign,
Yeah, they're trying
because
way
all
too hard,
these
or
little
they're
winglets and all these,
overcompensating.
Exactly, all these trick little bits on the car are counteracting something that isn't working. So
right.
the Sauber are one of those teams you always want to see do well. They're never going to win championships, they're never going to win races, but you want to see them being in a competitive position. And I think they'll get there slowly. It's a long way back from where they are at the moment, but they do things right. Peter Sauber will sell the shirt off his back for that team to go racing. And he'll do everything he can to get them onto the grid. And there's got to be a certain amount of respect for that there.
And they finished 13th. What Leclerc? I think.
He's the real deal. That kid. I remember on our Drafting the Circuit show last year talking about him when he was winning in Formula 2. That guy's got something about him, and it wouldn't surprise me if he's not doesn't spend a couple of years with Sauber and then potentially progress up to a Ferrari seat, because he's the real deal, that kid.
Ooh, there's a great Leclerc to Ferrari in a few years after Kimi calls it a deal, huh?
Yeah, potentially. I mean, if they want somebody that will keep Vettel honest but not necessarily upset the apple cart too much,
That's
I
true.
think he could be. He's not going to be far off. That kid's good. That kid's seriously good. You haven't seen such a dominant performance in the Formula 2 Championship for a long, long time as what he put out. So I think Sauber are looking good. Force India, it's a bit of a letdown with Force India, isn't it, really? After the sort of highs of last year of finishing, was it 4th in the Constructors' Championship last year?
I believe so. I mean, they were pretty much top 10 every race.
Yeah, and they had the whole driver battle between Perez and Ocon, and now
which
it's
I cannot believe they're still teammates, to be honest with you. Or no, they're not. Never mind. Yeah, Sans went to Renault. My bad.
But, no.
No. I'm sorry. Did you say Sans Ocon or Perez and Ocon?
No, Sergio Perez and
I'm sorry. I was looking at the. Okay, that was my fault. Never mind.
Yeah, no.
Same
Sainz
teammates.
Yeah, so Hulkenberg used to be at Force India, but he's obviously gone to Renault now.
Right.
But yeah, you look at those, and yeah, obviously they did have a lot of very close racing last year, and
But that's what you
potentially
want, I
that.
guess. You know.
Of course it is,
Yeah.
and
they're right there, right next to each other. Boom, boom. I mean,
exactly. And it goes back to that comment that we made, earlier on in the show. The first person you've got to beat is your teammate.
Yeah.
If you can't beat your teammate, you're not going to beat anybody. So, I think it's good for them. But again, are anybody going to notice them if they're battling over like 12th and 13th position? I think they've, opposite to Haas, as we mentioned earlier, they pushed themselves a lot throughout the back end of last year to try and secure that fourth place in the championship, and they're probably paying the price for it a little bit now with a slightly undeveloped car compared to everybody else. So
Yeah.
it'll be interesting to see how they can progress throughout the season. I don't think they'll finish, in the same position that they finished in the Constructors' Championship last year. I think they'll be mid-pack at best.
I don't know, mid-pack now. I think that flip-flop money really came in handy at the last minute.
It could do. It
Yep.
could well do. Yeah.
What do you think, Missy? You think so?
Yeah, it could, I guess. But I don't know. I just.
Well, speaking of fighting for battles, Missy, would you like to read off who won and who came in last behind Vettel?
Sure. So, as we said, Sebastian Vettel won the race, followed by Lewis Hamilton and Kimi Räikkönen to round out the podium. Then you had Daniel
Ricciardo.
Ricciardo. Then you had Fernando Alonso in fifth, Max Verstappen, Nico Hulkenberg, Valtteri Bottas, Stoffel Van Dorn, and Carlos Sainz was your top 10. Then you had Sergio Perez, Esteban Ocon, Charles Leclerc, Lance Stroll, Brendan Hartley, Romain Grosjean, Kevin Magnussen, Pierre Gasly, Marcus Ericsson, and Sergio Sirkin.
That was so wow. Okay, we'll work on that one.
He was the last place finisher, so it doesn't matter.
Wow.
I don't even know what happened to him because
he had a
I don't know what
brake
happened. I didn't know what happened to Ericsson either. Pierre Gasly, don't know what happened to those guys either. So because of the Porsche.
Ericsson, I think, just retired. I can't remember why that was.
Hydraulic problem. Lap 5.
Gasly had an engine problem.
Yep. Lap 13, and then lap 22, wheel nut. Lap 24, wheel nut. Both.
There is a funny.
I knew what those two were because those, that's the only thing that ABC did or ESPN did show.
It was ironic. There's like a little sort of caption going around Facebook at the moment, and being a European, I do see the funny side of it. It said. It's ironic that Formula One's only American team has a gun issue. Which,
I'm sorry. I muted my mic there for a second because I was having a coughing fit, but I had to unmute to laugh for that. Jesus.
So, wow.
Speaking of a gun issue, I'm going to finally tell my story, Miss, and you can't stop me because, like I said, this is our F1 show. We normally talk about all the other good stuff of IndyCar. I know you guys love it, but we'll be back later on in the week to do that. But we wanted to do this with Richard Sapienzo to cap off the beginning of the F1 season. So, Richard, I went to St. Pete, right?
Yep.
And the trip was great. We could talk about the trip another time. It was St. Pete. It was an IndyCar race. And MRTI was there, and normal stuff went on. So anyway, the day I have to go back, to the airport to fly home, I walk out to the front of the hotel and I ask her if there's a taxi service that you guys use or whatever. I need to get to the airport. And there was a young British fellow there, also waiting for a taxi, and he's like, "Where are you going?" I'm like, "Tampa International." He goes, "Oh, so am I." I'm like, "All right, you want to share a ride?" He's like, "Sure." So we shared a ride in this taxi. So the taxi comes rolling up. This thing's a 25-year-old Ford Caprice, maroon red, where the paint was still on.
Yeah.
Still on
Cool.
it, rust everywhere. The lady just she just stuck her head out. You go in the airport, like, yep, okay. Like she literally handed me the keys to open up the trunk. We put our luggage in a trunk filled with just crap you put in your trunk when you have a 25-year-old car, like just rags and whatever, you know.
Oh yeah.
Like, oh yeah, oh yeah, there's the WD-40, you know. So yeah, so it was like that. So we get into the back seat, and there's trash all over the floor. And he's looking at me, I'm looking at him like, oh boy, you know, like
Yep.
this isn't normal. So we get going, and she's on the phone with this guy the entire time, and she's using that very high tech AM FM receiver Bluetooth, you know, 90s
Oh
style,
yeah.
right? I was surprised she didn't have a tape deck with the tape and the wire. But so, and she's talking to a dude that is trying to explain to her how he's trying to get in them shorts. You know what I'm saying? I
Oh
think
yeah.
I think he said that at one point. And then and then she said something. I didn't catch it, but whatever she said told him that she had, you know, people in the car with her,
Yep.
because I guess he started getting a little graphic, to be honest. And so he goes, well, you got that heat, right? And she's like, oh, you know, I always got my heat with me, right? And you know, the British guy didn't get that, but I looked over. I'm like, did you catch that? And he's like, no. And I just did like the gun motion, and I pointed to her. I'm like, she's got a gun on her.
Oh yeah.
So he looks terrified. He goes, what? He thinks I'm like, don't worry, man. This isn't normal, but it's not out of the ordinary, but it's not
Exactly.
normal, trust me. By any means is this normal, but it's to be expected, I suppose. But don't worry about it. You know, just don't, I guess don't piss her off, really.
Yeah.
Or don't try to rob her, I guess. I don't know. But see, here's the thing. Every taxi cab they have, you know, it's like two numbers. One number is how much per whatever, like mile,
Hmm.
half mile, whatever, and the other, you know, number is the fare counter, right?
Yep.
Well, we drive from wherever we were to the airport, and I'm watching this thing click off at 25 cents a clip, and I'm looking at the mile markers going by, and I'm trying to see what the heck is this thing counting to get
Yeah.
where it's going to go, right? So, you know, I'm making small talk with the guy, and it turns out he's a race photographer, so he flew into St. Pete. So he's really
Oh.
big into IndyCar, and he's going to be back in Pocono too. So, hey, if you're listening, brother, what's up? Uh, anyway, see you in Pocono. So anyway, they start talking like real graphic, right? She started talking about something about her, you know, like she, you know, just because you take me to the Outback, and I love the Outback, but that doesn't mean you're this and that. And I went, wow, that's disgusting. So
Oh, I thought she was talking about the steakhouse, but
yeah,
okay. No.
no, she's meant something else.
Okay.
So then
Okay. Cool.
she took it off of the radio, and then she put her phone to her ear. So now she's driving us to the airport, flying down the highway, talking on the phone, and I look, and now the British guy and me are starting to get a little bit, you know, worried, right?
Yep.
Because yeah, so and so I pull up Google Maps like I always do when I just do it constantly, and I noticed
Oh
that
God,
before
can I end this, please?
no, because
Oh.
this is going to end right now. Uh, so I noticed that there's a big traffic jam right before our exit. I'm thinking, is this lady going to stop? No. She comes over the hill. She doesn't stop. I punch the back of her seat, and she slams on the brakes. So yeah, I saved us there. And then when we get to the airport, it wouldn't you know that the fare ticker lands exactly on $50
That's amazing when that happens, isn't it?
on the dime. So she turns around and she goes, "How much?" He asked how much. She goes, $50, and I went, "Try again." And she's like, "Excuse me," and I was just started pointing everything out. And she's like, "No, it's $50." I'm like, "Do you want to explain to the officer when you call that I didn't pay you about the gun you got?" And she went, all right, $20. And then
That's the great part in parts of Europe, sort of like in some of the big cities like Paris, Rome, places like that. If you get a taxi from inside the city limits, it is a flat rate to the airport. So they don't do, they it's like €25 to this airport or €30 to that airport. There's no sort of like, oh, we had to go the long way, So
yeah, and we were told it was 25 to the airport through this taxi
Yeah.
service.
Yeah, it looks like you were. Hey, you got out of there with your life, which I think at sometimes wasn't necessarily guaranteed.
Well, Google Maps saves me again, because if I had known that there was a traffic jam up ahead, I wouldn't have been paying attention either. Because I was too busy talking to the guy, because obviously I was talking to Zero, So, yeah, but it was cool. But that was a fun story, good story. I don't know why Missy hates me talking about it. It's the first time I ever brought it up on the show. So, I mean, I keep on referencing it, and she just keeps on cutting us off. Like it's a terrible story. I thought it was a good story. And
Yeah,
it's
it's
the
a great
truth.
story.
It's funny. It's crazy.
It was hysterical.
It's nutty, and you're jealous because you weren't there. That's why.
Oh,
That's right.
wow, that hurt.
Well, if you were there, we would have had a rental car. Yeah. So we wouldn't have Yeah. So the moral of the story is, folks, if you do travel, get your own rental car.
Sponsored by Avis.
National, actually, they hooked us up. Oh yeah.
But yes, all in all, this was a boring race. I believe I read somewhere that there was only 5 passes in this
I
race.
can believe that, yeah. And I don't know how many of those actually got covered on TV.
Literally
1.
5 pass. Yeah, like I can't believe that. I mean, the start
Oh
is
no,
one thing.
when Verstappen spun around, you've seen there's a couple of people pass him. There you go.
Yeah, there you go.
And lap like 3. And that's the only passes you've seen.
And then what was Verstappen's quote about the race?
He would have turned it off if he'd been watching it on TV.
Yeah, it was boring.
Well, yeah,
Need we say more about this one, huh?
Well,
I mean, and ESPN even apologized for their technical issues because, again, they, in the middle of talking, they cut to commercial, then you come back, you don't know what's going on, you're like, what the heck? I mean, they're side by side. There are so many I've never seen so many commercials in an F1 race. I really haven't. I couldn't believe it. There was just tons of them. And then at one point, I remember looking at the screen and it said last name versus last name. And I'm like, wow, that doesn't look right.
What?
Yeah, there was some technical difficulty there too. It said last name. So
Like it typed out the words last name?
yeah.
They forgot to
name,
type the name into the spot that says last name?
Yeah.
God.
So it said last name and last name. I'm
Well,
like, oh, okay. Those 2 drivers.
I guess
Okay,
they
last
shouldn't
name.
have fired that guy, huh? Good job, ESPN.
So hopefully they do better.
Skeleton
But
crew
yeah,
over
their first showing for F1 was a disaster.
Yeah,
Oh, boy.
hopefully it'll get better because I said the actual coverage and the actual show that Sky TV produces it is fantastic, and hopefully people over here can get to experience that because it is very, very good.
Hopefully there's got to be a like internet link somewhere where we can grab a Sky
I'm
TV
sure there is
broadcast.
somewhere. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, you can get anything pay-per-view on something somewhere.
Well, of course, coming out in the near future, I think they tried to get it ready for this week. I don't know when it'll be out. They are doing a proper streaming service that'll, I think, just show the full race and all the practice sessions and all the commercials and all the qualifying and race without any commercials through your Apple TV or your iPad or whatever other tablets are available.
Oh, but like a paid streaming service or something
Yes.
like
Yeah,
a HBO or something like that.
Exactly, yeah.
Gotcha.
And I think that's going to be the way for real fans to watch it.
Depending on how much.
I think they're talking about $100 a year.
Whoa! My God.
Wait.
Wow.
I almost fainted. What?
Oh.
That's like a somewhat decent app for an Apple Mac.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, they better produce some better racing if you expect me to pay
I know.
$100 a year for a streaming service
Exactly.
to
Yeah,
watch
that's-
Formula One.
People will, but in terms
People will
of
pay it, though. People will pay
yeah,
it.
and in terms of what you've seen, this last weekend, it's a million miles better than that. And I feel sorry for people that didn't have to go through those learning difficulties, especially when they go through learning difficulties in real time. It's not great, but
that's why Way Off Topic exists. I
yes.
kind of screwed up all over that show to make this show sound better. Yeah, I know it's hard to believe. I know. Anyway, there you go. there's another joke people can joke around with. Anyway, alrighty. So okay, let's do a quick I wouldn't say champion. Let's just say up to the Hungaroring mid-season break. Who team that's going to be leading and team that's going to be trailing them closely, probably.
To Hungaroring, let's have a think. Who? I think you could see similar to see last year. I think you can quite easily see Ferrari and Vettel. Capitalize on some mistakes and a little bit of trip ups on the Mercedes part. You've got a couple of races in there, Monaco and Hungaroring, which I don't think will suit Mercedes as much as it'll maybe suit the Ferrari and Red Bulls. So you may see, the odd race there. I think Mercedes will be the fastest car, but I think you may see them, let's say, trip over each other a little bit and make potentially similar mistakes to what you saw last weekend. Who's going to be struggling? I think Force India will struggle. I think obviously Sauber, unfortunately, will be at the back, but I think of the teams that were up there last year, I think Force India will struggle this year.
Right on. And surprise winner of the mid-pack teams. At least one race before then.
In terms of winning a race, I really can't.
In terms of winning a race, not the top three Red Bull.
Yeah, I can't see anybody outside of that winning a race unless you get some freak rain somewhere. Because all the teams have so many of these variables covered that you didn't used to, and the reliability is so high.
What about Fernando Alonso win before?
Potentially, I mean, again, if you get a wet, if you get a wet Austria or somewhere like that, you'd sort of put a little bit of money on Alonso, or maybe even let's go with a prediction. I think Hülkenberg will get a podium.
Okay, there you go.
I think he's entered the most races as a Formula One driver never to have a podium. So
you're right, yeah, and he's always there. He's always like 5, 6, 7, 8.
I think he'll get a podium. That'll be my sort of rather than a surprise winner, because I don't think there'll be a surprise winner. My prediction will be Hülkenberg to get a podium.
Right on. How about you, Messi?
I don't think there's going to be a surprise winner. I think the top three teams, are Mercedes, Ferrari, and Red Bull. So I don't think there's going to be a surprise winner this year unless something drastic happens and like everybody crashes out in the rain or something. I don't know. But I like Fernando Alonso. I think they look pretty good so far this year. It's only the first race, but they look good in qualifying. They look good in practices, and he scored a 5th place, which is more than they've done in the last 3 years.
About that, yeah. I think they did just.
Even Stoffel Vandoort, he top 10 too. So
yeah.
And at one point, I think they were running one right after the other. So, but I think they were like 10th and 11th in the beginning of the race, and then, like I said, Haas, the 2 cars went out, and then Max Verstappen did a little roundabout, and he didn't get a penalty, which I think I understood the reasoning. They didn't give him the penalty under I think it was under a virtual safety car that was out.
Yeah.
Because they said Alonso beat him by like 0.1 seconds or something. Wow. So they made Max give up the position. So. It was a close call, but yeah, that was the reasoning, is because they said that Fernando beat him by 0.1, so they told Max he had to give the spot up. Of course, Max, threw his hand out the window and was saying, "Come on!" But they didn't even tell Fernando he, should take the spot back.
Okay, and then team that will be struggling that you wouldn't expect would be
Williams.
Well, okay, all right.
I thought they weren't great last year, but they were decent. But it's only the first race of the year, but I thought they looked terrible.
They didn't have a good outing.
They're not good. They're not good.
Yeah,
right now.
No, they just didn't.
Stroll was the only one to finish pretty much in 18th. So, or I mean,
And
yeah, or 14th.
I think mid-season you'll see Kubica in that car instead of Schrockin.
Yeah,
I think at some point there's going to be that decision within the team that's like, hey, look, guys, Williams has said, oh, you can't look at the testing times, but every time Kubica tested back to back with one of the main drivers, he beat them. And it wasn't close at times. At some point they're going to have to turn around and say, I know the money that Schrockin's brought to the team is good and everything like that, but there's the morale within the team. There's the championship bonus money that they're going to get. They need him in the car. Especially if he goes out and wherever he's got his first Friday practice session and again beats them. It's like, come on, they've got to bite the bullet on that one and almost turn around and say, yeah, we did pick Schrockin because of the money.
Well, it's obvious. I mean, come on, it's been a pattern. It's been a pattern.
And they have to be. They're not. And they're losing that Martini money for next year as well.
That's pretty much why. Yeah.
Yeah, they need to. But as I say, I think another prediction. Some point this season, you'll see Kubica in that car.
Yeah, I would second that heartily. And before we let you go, and bid this F1 season a jolly. We hope you do well. I'm sure Missy would like to ask you what your opinion is on a simple FIA matter that they've been doing that has something sort of to do with F1. Well, it did anyway, but now it's focused. Well, it's FIA and Formula One is really close, So so what do you think about Carmen Jorda there, Rich?
I've caught a little bit of it. I must admit, I've sort of not followed it too closely.
Well, Missy will catch you up real quick, I think.
Don't follow up on it. It's just...
I've seen bits and pieces of it, and I think that
I feel the corset being tied tighter and tighter around my rib cage every time she talks.
Yeah, I don't.
Pretty soon,
I think
she's going to be saying women shouldn't vote either because we're not smart enough.
I think I saw a tweet or a comment by Alexander Wirtz, which made far more sense than anything she'd said in the last few months. So
and what was that?
I can't remember. Yeah, he was just like, "Shut up."
Yeah,
basically, it was just a massive.
So
put
I mean,
down. Like,
has Simona. I think Pippa. I think the best one I've read so far was from the old Audi team manager who's with Indy Carnell, and her name is escaping me. Missy, help me.
I know who you mean. Yeah,
Lena Gotti.
Yeah, her. It was short and sweet and to the point. It was perfect. Like I forget exactly what it was, but I'm like, yep, that's all you need to say.
Yep.
Yeah, just a dummy. But moving on. All right, Richard, it was great having you on, man.
No, it's good to be here. I enjoyed it as always.
Yeah, definitely should have you back to do this again. Like, say like during the
maybe on that mid-season break when they in August when they have a bit of a recess and we can catch up and see where we are.
Yeah, there's always a lot to talk about. Hopefully, Vettel doesn't use his car in anger by then again. So, Missy, any final words about F1 and your expectations for this year?
Well, after the first race, I hope it only can go up. Can't get much worse than it was the first race.
Yeah, you can only go one way from here, and that's up. That's right, Miss. Good call.
Oh, well, I'm gonna stick to that. Hopefully, it'll get me through the next couple of races. So.
And like we love Formula racing, and that's why we still watch F1 and all. But yeah, I hope it gets better. I really do.
I know. I bored myself with that race watching it twice.
Yeah, we keep complaining, but we keep on watching because we still love it.
Because again, I've rewound it at certain points because I'm just like, because they were just so excited about how Vettel was in first, and I'm like. Did I miss something? I thought he was already in first for like the past 20 laps. And I'm like, so I had to rewind it. And I was just like, okay, I didn't miss anything. He's been in first. What are you guys talking about? You're not even watching the same race I am. I'm like, ugh. So yes, I did watch it twice. Rewound it a couple times because I just, because of course I was trying to make out what the heck was going on at certain points. Because since it was in the side by side half the time, I was just trying to figure out what was going on.
Missy,
Who was,
I
just.
I promise on April 5th during the Bahrain GP, I'll find the Sky stream and we'll just plug the laptops in the TV. Okay.
All right.
Right on. So, Richard, where can they find you at, buddy?
So I'm drafting the circuits is the main place. I'm not I must admit I'm a bit of a hermit when it comes to this. I'm not a Twitter or a tweeter or an Instagram or a Snapchat or anything like that. So
But that's okay. But they can hear you talk on drafting the circuits, hosted by
the
our
Hoopzoo
good
Radio,
friend. Yep.
iTunes, I believe.
Pretty much everywhere podcasts are found.
Exactly.
Yep, and our good buddy Frank Santoroski hosts that. So
he sure does.
Yep, he runs a tight ship.
Oh yeah, yes. We are a finely tuned machine now. We're down to the second almost on our shows now.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, I want to communicate. Like, all right, enough F1 guys. Because I never have my chat up, so I don't see the chat that they chat with.
Yep.
And then I see it after we hang up, and I go, oh boy, they were really wanting me to shut up. That's funny. But anyways, and Missy, where can they find all of our good stuff at?
You can find all of our stuff at www.theindysportscarpodcast.com.
Easy as pie. Alrighty. And again, Richard, thank you for coming on. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And I think, Missy, on that note.
And on that note, you know that I know that Frank and Richard know the F1 season has begun.